Hi everyone, Marian here. This video will describe the quantitative methods that we used in the impact evaluations of protracted refugee situations, and it will explain why these methods were chosen. This is the first of 3 videos in this module. The 2 main reasons why evaluators use quantitative methods are to be able to generalize the findings for the entire population and to attribute the outcomes to the intervention. In our evaluations of refugees living in camps for many years, the quantitative surveys were mainly used to permit generalization of the findings to the whole refugee population. For quantitative methods to allow for the attribution of outcomes to the intervention, you typically conduct surveys of before and after the intervention, as well as undertaking surveys of similar comparison groups that did not receive the intervention. In data-poor and humanitarian contexts, like the protracted refugee situations, no before survey data is available that could provide a baseline showing the situation prior to receiving the assistance. Also, findings of a suitable comparison group, for example, refugees living in camps without food rations, is unlikely, since in these contexts, normally, all registered refugees in camps are entitled to food rations. To cope with these constraints, we constructed other comparisons based on what was appropriate in the context. In Ethiopia and Rwanda, for example, inter-camp comparisons were possible. And in Bangladesh, an opportunistic comparison group was identified, where both the context and the intervention differed. Who responds to the questionnaire? To identify the households to survey, in Ethiopia and Rwanda, random samples were taken from the refugee households in the camps. As all of the refugees received the same food rations and other assistance, our survey design allowed for the analysis of cross-sectional differences among camps and among different socioeconomic and ethnic groups within the refugee population. In Ethiopia, 1,155 refugee households were surveyed, stratified by 2 camps and by ethnic group. In Rwanda, 1,200 households were surveyed by 2 camps. In Bangladesh, during the inception phase, we found that there were a large number of ethnic Rohingya people living in unofficial makeshift camps. These people were judged by UNHCR to be refugees, but not by the government of Bangladesh. Therefore, they were disqualified from receiving food rations. This allowed us to compare the refugee groups in camps that received regular food rations with unregistered refugees with no food rations. As a result, 349 registered refugee households in 2 camps and 620 unregistered refugee households in 5 different locations were surveyed. We collected a wide range of information in the household surveys to determine whether the food rations, together with other assistance provided to the refugees in the refugee camps, had contributed to food security, creation and retention of assets, income generation, and other outcomes. For example, one of the survey questions asked refugees how they used the food that they had received. Another question asked them about their food consumption patterns in the past 7 days. Here are the findings for the Rwanda evaluation, comparing the responses in 2 different camps. So this ends our overview of the quantitative methods. The next video will present the qualitative methods that were used to collect data during the fieldwork phase.